da liberdade de escolha. Faz favor, professor João Noite.
Don't worry, we're not going to do a duet. Max, Teófilo, if I could sum up what has just been said by Louis Mira Amaral and try and do it in about 15 seconds. We may have different populations in different nations, but we have common problems. I would sum up those problems as follows. Populations up, age expectancy up, expectations of service up, demands of individuals for more power and more choice up, efficient use of health resources down, public sector financial resources down, and that was before the financial crisis. So that is the challenge that faces us. So why do I say that central to solving that challenge is the question of patient power and choice and the question of partnership? Well, as you would expect in front of an audience of such cultured and erudite Portuguese, Teófilo started with Plato and philosophy. I start in response. It is going to be a duet. Do you want to rewrite it? Yeah.
Do you need help to...
No, I don't need help. Why can't you do it from here? Switch it on. You are a qualified electrician, are you?
This one.
There you go. Thank you very much indeed. That's it. No, don't touch anything else. It will panic. Okay. You okay? Thank you. Could you give a big hand, please, for the electrician? Okay, I'm going to come back to this. Teófilo started with Plato in philosophy. I want to start with Hegel in history. The owl of Minerva spreads its wings only at the coming of the dusk. It is only in retrospect that the truth becomes obvious. I want to give you the history of what we did in the United Kingdom. This is where we started. We started with a waiting list in England on the left 10 years ago of something of the order of 1.4 million people waiting for an operation. That is a lot of people. We started with a waiting time of 104 weeks to wait for an operation, and the 104 weeks, which the electrician will bring up in a second, if the remote works, was not for the whole patient journey from the first appointment with the doctor right through to the operation. That 2 years waiting time was only from after the diagnosis to the operation. 2 years to get from the final diagnosis to the operation itself. Would you like to come and do it from here? Right, we've got it there. I want to show you where we are now, 10 years later. Actually, about 5 years into the reform programme. The 104 weeks maximum waiting time for individuals in England has now been reduced to a total, for that same period, of 6 weeks on average. 18 weeks from the first appointment with the doctor, through your assessment, to your diagnosis, to the operating theatre. That's what was announced in March of this year. And I want to show you now what has happened to our waiting lists if the electronic miracle will work. That is what has happened during the same period to our waiting lists. That is the number of people who were waiting more than 6 months for an operation. And the one that you can see finally on the right that is green isn't the final one. There are 4 beyond it. They're just so small that they mean nobody is waiting more than 6 months. That is, in practice, what was being argued for half an hour ideologically in the last speech. And that is the illustration of what you can achieve by a public-private partnership. At the end of the last decade, the waiting list for operations stood at 1.3 million, and today, as we speak, it's been reduced to around 500,000, and it's still going down. It doesn't mean the system's perfect, but it does mean that public-private partnership works. And the essence of that public-private partnership has been the introduction of competition and of patient choice. The introduction of free choice from this year in the United Kingdom means that patients referred to see a specialist can choose where they will be treated. And more importantly, they can choose, free at the point of need, any hospital that meets the National Health Service standards, whether it is in the public sector, in the private sector, or in the voluntary sector. Now, we're not at the end. We're not even at the beginning of the end of that revolutionary transformation. But already you can see some of the effects that it is having. A National Health Service that's more responsive to patients, it offers more choice and more information across all areas of healthcare. It gives a dramatic expansion of patient choice in the National Health Service, starting last year and this year, and a massive reduction in waiting lists and waiting times for operations. What does it mean? More power, better service, more quality, more speedily delivered services, and more patient satisfaction. And at the end of the day, colleagues, I have to tell you, and I come from the left on this, but the people who matter here are not you as the providers, nor are they the trade unions as the providers, and they're certainly not the politicians, whether they be ideologues of the left or the right. The people who matter are the people who are in pain, the customers, the consumers, the taxpayers who are paying for the National Health Service. And our benchmark as to whether a system is working is whether they are getting the treatment that they deserve and the power over that treatment that they deserve. I want to just say a few words then about how that modernisation programme was achieved, why it was necessary, and what lessons we can all learn. The National Health Service, when it was established, was a marvellous step forward, and Teófilo has already referred to it as a guide to what happened in Portugal. It was free and fair, but the problem with it was that it ended up as a free and fair service that gave you equal treatment, including equal misery, waiting on long queues, where if you were in pain, it was no satisfaction to know that anyone else in pain was waiting as long as you were. As long as, of course, as they didn't have money, because the well-connected and the well-provided was always able to buy their own health care. But the vast majority of the population weren't. So it was a free and fair system, but it was one with huge limitation to it. And what were their limitations? It was a public service, but it had no competition. It was not personal. There was no choice in it. There were long waits and long queues in order to get a service. And therefore, that public service had no competition to spur it on. It was open to everyone, but personal to no one. It was comprehensive, but it was not convenient. And it was fair in access, but as I said, all too often that meant that people were fairly shared in the delays and in the poor service. And the result was that 1.3 million waiting list that I showed you earlier on. The result was the maximum waiting time of 2 years. In short, what was a great advance in 1948 fell far short of expectations of people by 1998.